The marble floor beneath my feet was cold enough to seep through my designer heels, but I'd long stopped noticing such details. 3 years as Adrian Corsetti's wife had taught me to stand still and silent in gilded hallways, waiting while men decided the fate of cities behind closed doors. My hand drifted unconsciously to my abdomen, where our daughter grew in secret. 14 weeks now. I'd been hiding it with increasingly creative wardrobe choices, grateful that Adrian's recent preoccupation with territorial disputes kept his usually observant eyes elsewhere. The door to his study opened with a soft click, and Marcus emerged, my husband's second-in-command and closest friend since childhood. His expression was carefully neutral as always, but something in the way his gaze lingered on me sent an uncomfortable shiver down my spine. "He's ready for you now, Mrs. Corsetti," Marcus said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. I'd never liked the way he looked at me, though I'd never been able to articulate why. Adrian trusted him implicitly, had saved his life twice according to family lore. Who was I to question that bond with my feminine intuition? I smoothed down my silk blouse and entered Adrian's sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city we effectively ruled from the shadows. My husband stood with his back to me, tension evident in the rigid line of his shoulders beneath his tailored suit jacket. "You wanted to see me?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. He turned slowly, and my breath caught. Adrian Corsetti was devastatingly handsome even in anger, perhaps especially then. Dark hair perfectly styled, jaw carved from granite, eyes the color of storm clouds over the Mediterranean. But today those eyes held something I'd never seen before. Cold suspicion. "How long, Aurora?" His voice was dangerously soft. "How long what?" Genuine confusion colored my response. "How long have you been meeting with Dante Vince?" The name hit me like a physical blow. The Vince family had been our enemies for generations, their territory bordering ours in an uneasy truce that threatened to shatter at any moment. Dante was the heir apparent, known for his cruelty and ambition. Adrian, I don't even know what he looks like." "Don't." He crossed the space between us in 3 strides, close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar, and danger. "Don't lie to me. I have photographs, Aurora. You and Dante at the Bellanova Cafe. 3 different occasions over the past 2 weeks." Ice flooded my veins. "That's impossible. I haven't been to Bellanova in months." His hand shot out, gripping my chin with a gentleness that somehow felt more threatening than violence. "I want to believe you. God knows I want to. But the evidence is fabricated," I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "Adrian, please. You know me. How could you think?" "I know what I see." He released me abruptly, turning away as if the sight of me caused him pain. "The photographs are dated, time-stamped. Security footage confirms it. You were there." My mind raced, trying to understand. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make this appear real. But why? What purpose would it serve to make Adrian believe his wife was consorting with his greatest enemy? "Someone is setting me up," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Can't you see that? This is too convenient, too." "Marcus verified everything personally," Adrian interrupted. "The metadata on the photos, the cafe's security system. It's real, Aurora. The question is why." Marcus. Of course Marcus had verified it, because Marcus had probably orchestrated the entire thing. The realization struck with crystalline clarity, but I couldn't voice it. Adrian would never believe me over his childhood friend, his most trusted advisor. Especially not now, with fabricated evidence that seemed so damning. I needed to see those photographs, needed to understand how they'd been created and what they really showed. But more importantly, I needed to understand why someone wanted Adrian to believe his wife had betrayed him. "Let me see them," I demanded. The photographs. Let me see what you think you saw. Adrian moved to his desk, extracting a manila envelope with movements that seemed almost reluctant. He spread the contents across the polished surface, and my blood turned to ice. The woman in the photographs was me. Same hair, same clothes I remembered wearing on those exact dates. But I had no memory of these meetings, of sitting across from the dark-haired man whose face I now saw for the first time. Dante Vince was handsome in a way that seemed calculated, all sharp angles and predatory smiles. In each image, we appeared to be in intimate conversation. One showed his hand covering mine across the table. Another captured what looked like me laughing at something he'd said. The final photograph was the most damning, a moment that appeared to show me leaning in close, as if sharing a secret. "This isn't real," I whispered, but doubt crept in even as I spoke. The woman in these images wore my emerald earrings, the ones Adrian had given me for our second anniversary. How could this be fabricated when every detail was so precise? "I wanted to believe that," Adrian said quietly. "Spent 2 days trying to find evidence of manipulation. But the technical analysis came back clean. The timestamps matched security footage from other cameras in the area. Your car was parked 2 blocks away on each occasion. My car. Someone had access to my car, to my jewelry, possibly even to my clothes. The scope of this conspiracy was breathtaking in its complexity. If I was meeting with Dante Vince, I said slowly, forcing myself to think clearly despite the panic clawing at my chest. Why would I do it so publicly? Why leave such an obvious trail? That's what I keep asking myself. Adrian's jaw tightened. Unless you wanted to be caught. Unless this is some twisted game or... He stopped, his gaze dropping to where my hand had unconsciously moved to my stomach again. I saw the moment understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by a rage so profound it seemed to suck all air from the room. "No," I said quickly, protectively curving both arms around my abdomen. "Adrian, no. This baby is yours. I swear on everything we've built together." "How convenient," he said, his voice now completely devoid of emotion, which was somehow worse than anger. "The timing works perfectly with these meetings. Tell me, Aurora, is that why you suddenly started wearing loose clothing? Not because you've gained weight, but because you're carrying Dante Vince's child?" The accusation was so absurd, so completely unfounded, that hysterical laughter bubbled up in my throat. I swallowed it back, recognizing that nothing I said would convince him now. He'd already constructed the narrative in his mind, probably with Marcus's helpful guidance. "Get out," Adrian said quietly. "Go to our rooms. Don't leave them until I decide what to do with you." "Adrian. Now, Aurora. Before I do something we'll both regret." I fled, tears blurring my vision as I navigated familiar corridors that suddenly felt hostile. Our suite of rooms had always been my sanctuary, decorated in soft creams and golds, filled with books and photographs of happier times. Now it felt like a luxurious prison. I collapsed onto the bed, my whole body shaking. Someone was destroying my marriage with meticulous precision, and I was powerless to stop it. Worse, they'd timed this revelation perfectly with my pregnancy, ensuring that Adrian would question the paternity of our child. A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. I sat up, hoping against hope that Adrian had come to his senses. Instead, Marcus entered, carrying a tray with tea and small sandwiches. "I thought you might need something," he said, his voice gentle with what might have been concern. "This must be very difficult for you." I stared at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The way he held himself, the slight satisfaction he couldn't quite hide behind his mask of sympathy. This man was responsible for my nightmare. "Why?" I asked simply. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." I stood, fury overriding fear. "You orchestrated this entire thing. The photographs, the meetings I never attended. Why? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise that I'd figured it out perhaps, or admiration for my perception. You're upset and not thinking clearly. The evidence is fabricated by someone with access to everything. My schedule, my clothes, my jewelry. Someone close enough to Adrian that he'd never question their findings. I took a step toward him. That's you, Marcus. It's always been you. He set the tray down carefully, his expression shifting into something colder, more calculating. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, who would Adrian believe? His wife of 3 years, or the man who's been his brother for 30? Why? I asked again. What could you possibly gain from this? Marcus moved closer, and I instinctively backed away until my legs hit the bed. He stopped just short of touching me, close enough that I could see the obsession burning in his eyes. You should have been mine, he said softly. I saw you first, that night at the Palazzo Gala. I was the one who noticed you across the room, who planned to approach you. But Adrian saw the way I looked at you, and he claimed you first. Because that's what he does. He takes everything I want. Horror washed over me as I realized the depth of his delusion. So, you're destroying my marriage because of some imagined slight 3 years ago? It's not imagined. His hand reached out, touching my cheek. I flinched away, but there was nowhere to go. Every day watching you with him, knowing you should have been mine. I waited, planned. And then I discovered your little secret. His gaze dropped to my stomach, and fresh fear spiked through me. I'm a patient man, Aurora. I've waited 3 years. I can wait a few months more. Once Adrian casts you aside, and he will, because I'll make sure of it, you'll need someone to take care of you and that baby. I'll be there, ready to offer comfort and protection. I'll tell Adrian everything, I said, my voice shaking but determined. Marcus laughed softly. No, you won't, because if you do, I'll make sure the Vince family knows you're carrying Adrian's heir. Right now, they think you're Dante's lover, which protects you. But if they learn the truth, they'll kill you in the most public, humiliating way possible, just to hurt Adrian. And he'll start a war that will destroy everything he's built. The trap closed around me with suffocating completeness. Marcus had constructed a situation where telling the truth would result in my death and ignite a conflict that would devastate everyone I cared about. You're insane, I whispered. I'm in love, he corrected. And love makes men do extraordinary things. He left me then, alone with the terrible knowledge of what I faced. Marcus held all the cards, Adrian's trust, fabricated evidence, and the threat of war hanging over everything like a sword. I moved to the window, watching darkness fall over the city. Somewhere out there, the Vince family operated under the belief that I was Dante's mistress, a perception that currently kept me safe. If I tried to prove my innocence, Marcus would ensure they learned the truth, and I would become a target. But if I said nothing, Adrian would continue believing I'd betrayed him. Our marriage would crumble, and eventually Marcus would make his move, expecting me to fall into his arms out of desperation. My hand pressed against my abdomen, feeling the slight swell that housed my daughter. I'd learned the gender yesterday from the doctor I'd been seeing in secret, afraid to tell Adrian until the first trimester passed safely. A daughter. We were going to have a daughter. I couldn't let her grow up in Marcus's shadow, raised by a man who destroyed her parents' marriage out of obsessive jealousy. But I also couldn't risk her life by starting a war. There had to be a third option, a way to protect her that I hadn't yet seen. I stood at that window long into the night, my brilliant mind working through scenarios and possibilities, rejecting each one that ended in my death or my daughter's danger. By dawn, I had the skeleton of a plan. It was desperate, possibly suicidal, and would require sacrificing everything I'd built with Adrian. But it might, Just might. Keep our daughter safe and expose Marcus's betrayal without igniting a war. I would have to become the villain in our story, at least for a while. I would have to let Adrian hate me, let Marcus think he'd won. And in that space between their certainty and the truth, I would find my opening. First, though, I needed to learn everything I could about the Vince family, about Dante specifically. If I was going to play the role Marcus had crafted for me, I needed to make it convincing enough that no one suspected the truth. I had approximately 6 months before my daughter's arrival. 6 months to orchestrate the most dangerous gambit of my life. The morning sun painted the city gold, and I watched it rise with dry eyes. I'd cried enough. Now it was time to be strategic, to be ruthless, to protect what mattered most even if it meant losing everything else. Adrian didn't know it yet, but his wife was about to become a ghost. Someone he'd thought he knew, who would prove to be as elusive and dangerous as morning mist. I would save us all, or die trying. But either way, Marcus would not win. Adrian didn't come to our rooms that night, or the next. I learned from hushed conversations between household staff that he'd moved into the guest wing, a deliberate and public separation that set tongues wagging throughout our organization. Word spread quickly in our world. The powerful Adrian Corsetti had found his wife unfaithful. I was placed under what amounted to house arrest. Guards appeared outside my doors, ostensibly for my protection, but clearly there to ensure I couldn't leave. My phone was confiscated, my computer access revoked. I was isolated completely, cut off from any possibility of reaching the outside world, which meant I had to work with what I had: time, observation, and the extensive library Adrian had assembled in our rooms. I spent 3 days reading everything I could find about the Vince family history, their business operations, their territorial disputes with the Corsetti organization. I memorized faces from old photographs, studied the psychology of men raised in violence, learned the subtle language of power and betrayal that governed our world. Dante Vince emerged from my research as a fascinating contradiction. Educated at Oxford, fluent in 5 languages, with a legitimate business empire built on tech investments. But underneath that polished exterior lived the same brutality that characterized his father and grandfather. He was known for creative cruelty, for making examples of those who crossed him in ways that ensured no one would dare try again. And someone wanted Adrian to believe I was involved with this man. The question was, who would benefit most from such a belief? And I kept circling back to Marcus. On the 4th day, he visited me again, this time without the pretense of kindness. He entered my sitting room without knocking, a clear assertion of power. "You're looking well," he observed, his gaze traveling over me with possessive appreciation. "Pregnancy suits you." "What do you want, Marcus?" I remained seated by the window, book in my lap, determined not to give him the satisfaction of my fear. "To discuss your future. Adrian is meeting with his advisors tonight to determine what should be done about you. The consensus is leaning toward annulment and exile, sending you away somewhere remote where you can't embarrass the family further." How considerate. I kept my voice carefully neutral. I argued for leniency, of course, suggested that you might have been coerced, manipulated, that the pregnancy might indeed be Adrian's child, regardless of these unfortunate meetings with Dante. He moved closer, perching on the arm of my chair. "I can continue to advocate for you, Aurora, but I'll need something in return." "And what would that be?" His hand touched my hair, gentle but unmistakably threatening. "Your gratitude, your trust, an acknowledgement that I'm your only ally in this situation." I turned to look at him directly, letting him see the contempt I no longer bothered to hide. "You're not my ally, Marcus. You're my tormentor. The only question is how long before Adrian realizes what you've done." He won't. Marcus's confidence was absolute. I've been building this framework for months. Every piece fits perfectly. Even if you somehow convinced him to investigate further, he'd only find more evidence of your betrayal. I've been very thorough." "Months?" I repeated, a chill running through me. "You've been planning this for months." "Since the moment I realized you were pregnant." His smile was almost fond. "I have people everywhere, Aurora, including in your doctor's office. I knew about the baby before you'd even decided to tell Adrian, and I saw my opportunity." The scope of his obsession was staggering. He'd infiltrated my medical care, monitored my most private moments, all while maintaining his facade as Adrian's trusted friend. "You won't win," I said quietly. "Eventually, the truth always comes out." "Perhaps. But by then, what will it matter? Adrian will have discarded you. The organization will have moved on, and you'll be alone, vulnerable, with a child to protect. Where else will you turn, if not to the only man who's shown you kindness?" He left before I could formulate a response, and I sat in the lengthening shadows, my mind racing. Marcus had prepared for every contingency, built a trap so comprehensive that any attempt to escape would only entangle me further. But he'd made one mistake. He'd told me about the months of planning, about his people infiltrating my life, which meant there was a network I could potentially trace, evidence of his manipulation if I could just find it. I pulled out the book I'd been pretending to read, opening it to the page where I'd been making notes in the margins. It was an old copy of Machiavelli's The Prince, and my annotations looked like philosophical musings to any casual observer. But they were actually a timeline, matching dates of Marcus's opportunities to manufacture evidence against me. That night, I feigned illness. The guard called for Dr. Russo, Adrian's personal physician, who arrived an hour later looking concerned. "Mrs. Corsetti, I understand you're not feeling well." I pressed my hand to my abdomen, letting genuine fear show in my eyes. "The baby. Something feels wrong. Please, I need to see my obstetrician." Dr. Russo's examination was thorough, but revealed no immediate crisis. Still, I'd planted the seed of worry, mentioning specific symptoms that could indicate complications requiring specialist care. "I'll speak with Adrian," he promised. "Even under the current circumstances, the health of a child, any child, must be the priority." After he left, I allowed myself a moment of relief. This was my opening, a legitimate reason to leave the house with medical supervision. And once outside these walls, I might find an opportunity to make contact with someone who could help. But who? Adrian wouldn't believe me. Marcus had corrupted the inner circle. The Vince family thought I was Dante's mistress. I was surrounded by enemies and false friends, with no one to trust, unless I created an ally from the most unlikely source. The idea was insane, potentially suicidal. But it was also the only move Marcus wouldn't anticipate because it was so counterintuitive. I needed to make actual contact with Dante Vince. If I could explain the situation, show him the evidence of manipulation, perhaps he'd see the opportunity. Marcus's scheme had already damaged relations between our families. If Dante learned he was being used as a pawn in someone else's game, his pride alone might motivate him to expose the truth. It was a desperate gambit, requiring me to walk directly into the enemy's territory. But desperation was becoming my constant companion. The next morning, Adrian appeared at my door. He looked terrible, drawn, exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. My heart ached seeing him like this, knowing I couldn't bridge the distance Marcus had created between us. "Dr. Russo says you need to see a specialist," he said without preamble. "I'm arranging an appointment for this afternoon." "Thank you." I kept my voice formal, matching his tone. His gaze dropped to my stomach, and I saw his internal war. The part of him that wanted to believe this child was his, fighting against the evidence Marcus had fabricated. "Aurora," he said softly, and for a moment I thought he might relent. "If you told me the truth, all of it, I might be able to protect you. But I need honesty. No more lies. I've never lied to you, I said, meeting his eyes. Not once in 3 years. But you've chosen to believe fabricated evidence over your knowledge of who I am. What can I say that would change your mind now? He flinched as if I'd struck him. The evidence is real. The photographs, the security footage, the metadata. Marcus checked everything. Unless you're suggesting he somehow... I'm not suggesting anything, I interrupted, knowing this wasn't the time to accuse Marcus directly. I'm simply stating facts. I never met with Dante Vince. This baby is yours, and someone is destroying our marriage for their own purposes. Then who? Adrian demanded. Who has the resources, the access, the motivation to do this? I held his gaze, willing him to see the truth I couldn't speak aloud. But his certainty, built on Marcus's careful manipulation, was an impenetrable wall. I'll be ready for the appointment this afternoon, I said instead. He left without another word, and I prepared for what might be my only chance at freedom. The specialist's office would have security, of course, but it would also have windows, exits, opportunities. I dressed carefully in a dove-gray dress that concealed my pregnancy, while allowing freedom of movement. In my pocket, I placed a small diamond bracelet, portable wealth if I needed it. And in my bra, I tucked a note I'd written the night before, explaining everything to Dante Vince. The car ride to the medical building was tense. 2 of Adrian's men accompanied me, watchful and alert, but they were focused on external threats, not on the possibility that I might try to escape. Dr. Moretti's office was on the 14th floor, a pristine space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She examined me thoroughly, asked detailed questions about my symptoms, and assured me that the baby was healthy despite my stress levels. However, she added carefully, continued emotional turmoil isn't good for either of you. Is there somewhere you could go for a few weeks? Somewhere peaceful, away from current difficulties? I wanted to laugh at the innocent suggestion. Unfortunately, that's not possible at the moment. I see. Her eyes were kind, understanding more than I'd said. Well, at least make sure you're eating properly and getting enough rest. Stress during pregnancy can have lasting effects. While she wrote a prescription for prenatal vitamins, I excused myself to use the restroom. My guards waited outside the office door, confident that a 14th floor bathroom presented no escape route. They were wrong. I locked the door behind me and immediately went to the window. It opened. Thank God for building codes requiring operable windows in medical facilities. The ledge outside was narrow, but it ran along the building's exterior, connecting to the maintenance access I'd spotted earlier. This was insane. I was pregnant, alone, and about to edge along a 14th floor ledge in designer heels. But the alternative was remaining Marcus's captive, watching helplessly as he manipulated everyone around me. I kicked off my shoes, took a deep breath, and climbed through the window. The wind hit me immediately, cold and aggressive. I pressed my body against the building, inching along the ledge with my heart in my throat. Don't look down. Just move. 1 foot in front of the other. The maintenance access was 20 feet away, but it felt like miles. My fingers scrabbled for purchase on the rough concrete, my bare feet struggling for grip. Below, the city sprawled, indifferent to my terror. Halfway there, I heard shouting from the bathroom window. They'd discovered my escape. I had maybe 30 seconds before they reached the roof access or the adjoining office. I moved faster, recklessly, and my foot slipped. For a heart-stopping moment, I hung suspended over nothing, fingers clawed into a crack in the concrete. Then I found my footing again, pressed on, reached the maintenance door. It was locked. Of course it was locked, but the lock was old, simple. I pulled out a bobby pin from my hair, thank God for old skills learned in a reckless youth, and worked the mechanism with shaking fingers. The guards would be coming around the corner any second now. The lock clicked. I wrenched the door open and tumbled inside, pulling it shut behind me just as I heard footsteps on the ledge. The maintenance stairwell was dark, musty, clearly rarely used. I descended rapidly, my bare feet silent on the concrete steps. Behind me, the door burst open, and I heard them coming. But I had a head start now. And I knew something they didn't. These old buildings had multiple exit points, remnants of decades-old fire codes. I just had to reach the 8th floor, where I'd spotted a service elevator earlier. I ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time, one hand protectively curved over my belly. My daughter deserved better than this desperate flight, but she also deserved a mother who fought for her survival. 8th floor. I burst through the door, startling a janitor mopping the hallway. The service elevator was at the end of the corridor, doors blessedly open. "Sorry!" I gasped, running past him. I made it inside just as my pursuers reached the 8th floor. The doors closed on their shouting, and the ancient elevator lurched downward. I had minutes now, maybe less. They'd radio ahead, block the main exits. I needed to reach street level and disappear into the crowd before they could organize a proper search. The elevator groaned to a stop at the ground floor, opening into a loading dock area. Delivery trucks, stacked pallets, workers in coveralls. Perfect. I straightened my dress, adopted a confident walk, and strode past the workers as if I belonged exactly where I was. No one questioned a well-dressed woman moving with purpose. Out into the alley. The afternoon sun was blinding after the dimness of the maintenance areas. I moved quickly, putting distance between myself and the building, heading toward the crowded main street 2 blocks away. Adrian's men would be searching for me, but they'd expect me to run away from the city center, not toward it. I had one advantage. They underestimated my capacity for risk. Now came the truly dangerous part. I needed to make contact with the Vince family, specifically with Dante, and I needed to do it in a way that didn't get me killed on sight. The Vince territory began 6 blocks from Adrian's, a border marked by subtle signs. Different graffiti tags, different businesses, different faces watching from doorways. I was walking into enemy territory, visibly pregnant and alone, about to claim I was carrying their heir's child. This was going to require my most convincing performance yet. I found a small cafe on the border between territories, neutral ground where both families occasionally did business. I cleaned up as best I could in their bathroom, borrowed a phone from a sympathetic waitress, and made the call I'd memorized. Dante Vince's office. How may I help you? I took a deep breath. Tell him Aurora Corsetti needs to speak with him, urgently, about the child. The cafe was the kind of place where people minded their own business, where the coffee was served strong and the questions were kept to a minimum. I sat in a corner booth, my back to the wall, a habit I'd picked up from Adrian, though I'd never imagined needing it for protection from his own organization. Dante Vince arrived 30 minutes later, flanked by 2 men whose casual clothes couldn't disguise their purpose. They swept the cafe with professional efficiency before allowing him to approach my table. He was exactly as the photographs suggested, handsome in a calculated way, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have belonged to a Renaissance prince. His suit was midnight blue, probably Italian, definitely expensive. But it was his eyes that held me, intelligent, assessing, and dangerously curious. "Mrs. Corsetti," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "This is unexpected." I imagine so. My hands were folded on the table, deliberately visible, non-threatening. "Thank you for coming." "A meeting with my enemy's wife, who claims to be carrying my child?" He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. How could I resist such intrigue? His directness caught me off guard. "You know about the photographs, then?" "Everyone knows about the photographs. They've been circulating through our world for a week now. Marcus Delacroix made sure of that." His head tilted slightly. The question is why you're here, openly seeking me out, when that confirms every accusation against you. I'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed my words carefully. But sitting across from this dangerous man, I realized preparation meant nothing. Only truth would work now. The photographs are fabricated, I said simply, and I can prove it. Interest flickered in his expression. Can you? I was never at the Bellanova Cafe on any of those dates. The woman in those images is made to look like me through careful staging and digital manipulation. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to make my husband believe I was meeting with you. And this someone would be Marcus Delacroix? Dante leaned back, studying me. Adrian's most trusted advisor, his childhood friend, the man who brought the evidence to light. What possible motivation would he have? Obsession. I met his gaze steadily. He wants me, has wanted me since before Adrian and I met. He spent 3 years watching, waiting for an opportunity. When he discovered my pregnancy, he saw his chance. Dante was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gestured to one of his men who brought over a slim tablet. These are the photographs that have been circulating, he said, pulling up images I recognized. They've been analyzed by 3 different experts, all of whom confirmed their authenticity. The metadata is clean, the shadows and lighting consistent. The security footage corroborates the timeline. If these are fabrications, they're the most sophisticated I've ever seen. Because Marcus had time and resources. He's been planning this for months. I leaned forward. But there's one thing he couldn't anticipate, that I would come directly to you and explain the truth. Or, Dante countered smoothly, this is an elaborate scheme where you're trying to play both sides. Perhaps you and Marcus are actually working together, and this entire drama is designed to weaken my family's relationship with the Corsettis, create confusion and conflict. I hadn't considered that interpretation, and my surprise must have shown. You see the problem, Mrs. Corsetti? In our world, trust is currency, and you're currently bankrupt. Your husband doesn't trust you. I certainly don't trust you. The only person who seems to trust you is Marcus. And according to your story, he's your enemy. Then test me, I said. Check my phone records from the dates in question. Interview the people I actually was with. The evidence of my innocence exists. Marcus just made sure no one was looking for it. Your phone records show you turned off location services during those times, Dante replied. Convenient, wouldn't you say? Of course. Marcus would have thought of that detail. I can submit to a lie detector test, hypnosis, whatever you need to confirm I'm telling the truth. My desperation was showing, but I was past the point of pride. I'm carrying Adrian Corsetti's child, not yours. This baby is the heir to his organization, and Marcus is using both of our families as pawns in his obsessive game. Dante studied me with those calculating eyes. Let's say, hypothetically, that I believe you. What exactly do you expect me to do about it? Help me prove the truth. You have resources, access to technology and experts that I don't. More importantly, you have motivation. Someone is using your name and reputation to destroy a marriage and potentially start a war between our families. A war that would benefit the Vince organization considerably, he pointed out. With the Corsettis fractured by internal betrayal, distracted by marital drama, we could expand our territory significantly. My heart sank. He was going to refuse. Why would he help me when my destruction served his interests? But then Dante's expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering there. However, I don't appreciate being used as someone's pawn. If Marcus Delacroix thinks he can manipulate my family's reputation for his personal vendetta, he's badly miscalculated. Hope sparked tentatively in my chest. You'll help me. I'll investigate, he corrected. And if your story checks out, If Marcus is indeed behind this elaborate deception, then yes, I'll help you expose him. Not out of kindness, Mrs. Corsetti, but because no one uses the Vince family's name without permission. It wasn't the alliance I'd hoped for, but it was something. How long will the investigation take? Days, perhaps a week. His gaze dropped to my abdomen. How far along are you? 14 weeks. And Marcus knows this? I nodded. He has people in my doctor's office. That's how he found out before I told Adrian. Dante's expression darkened. The level of infiltration he achieved is impressive. Disturbing, but impressive. He stood, straightening his jacket. Stay here for the next hour, then return to your husband. Don't give any indication that we've spoken. I'll contact you when I have information. How? I asked. I don't have a phone and I'm being watched constantly. He smiled, and for the first time it seemed almost genuine. Mrs. Corsetti, I'm very good at getting messages to people who don't wish to be reached. Trust that when I need to contact you, I will find a way. After he left, I sat in the cafe for the prescribed hour, drinking tea and trying to calm my racing thoughts. I just made a deal with my husband's enemy, based my entire future on a dangerous gamble. If Dante decided to use this situation against Adrian rather than help me, I'd made everything infinitely worse. The walk back to Adrian's territory was surreal. I expected his men to be searching everywhere, but the streets were oddly quiet. Either they'd given up, or they were watching and waiting to see where I'd go. When I reached the gates of our estate, the guards' expressions confirmed the latter. They'd known exactly where I was the entire time. Adrian waited in the entrance hall, his fury barely contained behind a mask of ice. Where have you been? Out, I said simply. I needed air, space to think. You climbed out a 14th floor window, Dr. Moretti's office, nearly fell to your death. His voice was deadly quiet. What were you thinking? I was thinking that being held prisoner in my own home was unacceptable, that if you won't believe the truth, I need to find evidence you can't deny. By running away, by putting yourself and that child at risk. He moved closer, and I saw the fear beneath his anger. Despite everything, some part of him still cared. You could have died, Aurora. That ledge was inches wide. But I didn't die. I survived, just like I'll survive whatever Marcus is planning next. The mention of Marcus's name made Adrian's expression shudder. Marcus is trying to protect you, to find some explanation that doesn't end with you exiled or worse. Why do you insist on blaming him? Because he's the one orchestrating this nightmare, I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, ask yourself why he's the only one who conveniently finds evidence against me. Why every trail leads back to him. Why he's so invested in proving my betrayal. He's my friend. He's been my friend since we were children. But I heard the tiny thread of doubt in Adrian's voice. Has he? I pressed. Or has he been waiting for an opportunity to take what he believes should have been his? Enough. Adrian's hand shot up, stopping my words. You're exhausted, obviously not thinking clearly. Go to your rooms. Rest. We'll discuss this tomorrow when you're calmer. I was being dismissed like a hysterical child, but I'd planted the seed of doubt, and that would have to be enough for now. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. I'd escaped a 14th floor ledge, made contact with my husband's enemy, and survived to tell the tale. But I was still trapped in Marcus's web, still pregnant and vulnerable, still watching my marriage disintegrate. A soft sound at my door made me tense. I'd locked it, but the handle turned anyway, someone with a key. Marcus stepped into my darkened room, closing the door softly behind him. That was quite a performance today, he said conversationally. The daring escape, the dramatic leap of faith. very cinematic. I sat up, pulling the blanket higher. Get out. I don't think so. We need to talk about your meeting with Dante Vince. He moved closer, and I could smell whiskey on his breath. Did you really think we weren't watching? That I hadn't anticipated you might do something desperate? Dread pooled in my stomach. You followed me? Of course. And now I have photographs of you meeting with Dante, which only confirms everything I've been telling Adrian. You're making this too easy, Aurora. He'd planned for this contingency too. My meeting with Dante, meant to be my salvation, had instead provided Marcus with exactly the evidence he needed to seal my fate. What do you want? My voice was steadier than I felt. I want you to stop fighting. Accept what's happening. Adrian will annul the marriage within the week. The meeting with Dante was the final proof he needed that you've been disloyal. You'll be sent away somewhere remote, guarded but comfortable. And when the baby comes, I'll ensure you're both protected, provided. In exchange for what? Marcus sat on the edge of my bed, his hand resting possessively on my ankle through the blanket. Your gratitude. Your eventual acceptance that I'm the only one who truly cares what happens to you. You're delusional if you think. His hand tightened, cutting off my words. I'm patient, Aurora. I've waited 3 years. I can wait as long as necessary. But understand this. You're mine now, whether you accept it or not. Adrian is done with you. The Vince family thinks you're a liar and a schemer. You have nowhere to go, no one to turn to, except me. He left before I could formulate a response, locking the door behind him. And I realized with sick certainty that he was right about one thing. I was running out of options, out of time, out of allies. Unless Dante came through with evidence that could expose Marcus's manipulation. I had to believe he would, had to trust that his pride and his hatred of being used would motivate him to uncover the truth. Because if Dante didn't help me, I was truly alone. And Marcus would win. 3 days passed in suffocating silence. Adrian avoided me completely, conducting his business from his office while I remained confined to our suite. Guards rotated outside my door in 8-hour shifts, a constant reminder of my captivity. But on the morning of the 4th day, something changed. I woke to find a newspaper had been slipped under my door, specifically the society section, folded to show a particular article. The headline made my blood run cold. Corsetti marriage in crisis. Wife caught in compromising position with Vince heir. Below it was a photograph from my meeting with Dante at the cafe. The angle made it look intimate, conspiratorial. The caption suggested I'd been caught in a secret rendezvous with my alleged lover. Marcus had made good on his threat. My attempt to find help had been twisted into further evidence of my betrayal. I was still staring at the article when Elena, the household manager, knocked softly and entered with breakfast. She was one of the few staff members who still treated me with something approaching kindness. Mr. Corsetti requests your presence in his study at noon, she said quietly, setting down the tray. Her eyes held sympathy and something else, concern, perhaps, or warning. Thank you, Elena. She hesitated at the door. Mrs. Corsetti, if I may, there are people in this house who know you're being treated unfairly. Not many, but some. We're not all blind. The words were carefully chosen, deliberately vague, but they gave me a sliver of hope that I wasn't completely isolated. At noon precisely, I descended to Adrian's study. The guards accompanied me, though they remained outside when I entered. Adrian sat behind his desk, his face carved from stone. Marcus stood beside him, his expression professionally concerned, but his eyes gleaming with triumph. 2 other men I recognized as senior advisors were also present. This wasn't a private conversation, but an official proceeding. Aurora, Adrian began formally, we need to discuss the future of this marriage. I remained standing, refusing the chair Marcus had positioned for me. "I'm listening. The evidence of your infidelity has become insurmountable. The photographs, the meetings, yesterday's newspaper article. I can no longer ignore." "You mean you've decided to believe lies over 3 years of loyalty?" I interrupted. "To trust Marcus's manufactured evidence over your knowledge of who I am?" "The evidence is not manufactured," Marcus said smoothly. "Multiple independent sources have verified." "Sources you control," I countered. "Experts you paid. Information you manipulated." "Enough." Adrian's voice cut through the tension. "I've tried to give you the benefit of the doubt, Aurora, but you're carrying another man's child, meeting with him secretly, making a mockery of our marriage and our organization." "This child is yours," I said, my hand moving protectively to my abdomen. "DNA will prove that when she's born." Surprise flickered across Adrian's face. I'd never told him the gender, had been saving that revelation for a special moment that would never come now. "A girl?" he asked quietly. "Yes. Your daughter, who you're choosing not to know because you'd rather believe comfortable lies than uncomfortable truths." One of the advisors cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss the practical arrangements. Mrs. Corsetti could be relocated to one of the properties upstate, provided for financially, allowed to—" A knock interrupted him. One of the guards opened the door to reveal a courier holding a large envelope. "Delivery for Mr. Corsetti," he announced. "Urgent, from Dante Vince." The room went completely silent. Marcus's confident expression flickered with something that might have been concern. Adrian took the envelope, breaking the seal with careful fingers. Inside were several documents and what appeared to be a USB drive. He inserted the drive into his laptop, and we all watched as files opened on the screen. "These are technical analyses of the photographs," Adrian said slowly, reading. "Independent verification from 3 different labs, not Marcus's usual contacts. They show evidence of sophisticated manipulation, timestamps altered, metadata forged, images composited from multiple sources." Marcus moved closer, trying to see the screen. "That's impossible. I had those verified by people in your pocket." Dante Vince's voice came from the doorway. He'd entered so quietly, no one had noticed. His 2 bodyguards flanked him, and Adrian's guards had made no move to stop them. "People who told you what you paid them to say." "You're not welcome here," Marcus said, his composure cracking. "And yet here I am." Dante moved into the room with the confidence of a man who knew he held all the cards. "Shall I explain what I found when I investigated your accusations against Mrs. Corsetti?" He didn't wait for permission. "The woman in the photographs is indeed Aurora Corsetti, or rather, someone made to look exactly like her through a combination of deepfake technology, body doubles, and carefully staged shots. The real Aurora was nowhere near the Bellanova Cafe on any of those dates. I have witness testimony, security footage from her actual locations, credit card receipts, cell phone tower data, all proving she was elsewhere." He pulled out more documents. "Furthermore, the people who supposedly verified the photograph's authenticity all have financial connections to Marcus Delacroix. Payments made through shell companies, favors owed, leverage applied. Not one of them was actually independent." Adrian's face had gone white. He looked from the documents to Marcus, disbelief warring with dawning comprehension. "This is absurd," Marcus protested. "Dante Vince has obvious motivation to discredit." "I have motivation to protect my family's reputation," Dante corrected coldly. "You used my name, my image, to manipulate your supposed best friend. That's an insult I don't tolerate lightly." He turned to Adrian. "Marcus Delacroix has been systematically destroying your marriage for months. He infiltrated your wife's medical care to learn about her pregnancy. He manufactured evidence of her infidelity using resources that must have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, all because he wants what he believes should have been his from the beginning. Your wife. The room erupted. The advisors spoke over each other, demanding explanations. Marcus began a vehement denial that died on his lips when Adrian stood slowly, his expression more terrifying than I'd ever seen it. Is this true? Adrian asked Marcus, his voice deadly quiet. Adrian, you have to understand. Marcus began. Is it true? The bellow made everyone flinch. I'd never heard Adrian lose control like this. Never seen the violence he was capable of rise so close to the surface. Marcus's silence was answer enough. Get him out of my sight, Adrian said softly. Now, before I kill him with my bare hands. Two of Adrian's guards moved forward, but Marcus stumbled backward, his hand going to his jacket. I did this for us, he said, desperation replacing his usual smooth confidence. We were supposed to be brothers, Adrian. You took everything from me. The position in the organization, the respect, her. I only wanted what was rightfully mine. She was never yours, Adrian said. She was never anyone's possession to take. Marcus pulled out a gun, and chaos exploded. Dante's bodyguards moved first, drawing their own weapons. Adrian's guards followed. I found myself suddenly grabbed by Elena, who'd appeared from nowhere, pulling me down behind the desk and shielding me with her body. Don't hurt him, I heard myself shout, though I didn't know if I meant Marcus or Adrian. Don't. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. For a terrible moment, I thought someone had been killed. Then I heard Marcus scream, and I knew he'd fired at Adrian but missed. What followed was brief and brutal. Adrian crossed the space between them with frightening speed, disarming Marcus with a practiced move I'd never seen him use. The gun clattered across the floor. Then Adrian's fist connected with Marcus's jaw, once, twice, a third time, his rage finally finding physical outlet. Adrian, stop. I emerged from behind the desk. You'll kill him. He had Marcus by the throat now, slamming him against the wall. He tried to destroy us, tried to take you from me. He deserves justice, not murder, I said, moving closer despite the danger. Please, Adrian, don't let him turn you into a monster. Something in my voice reached him. His grip loosened fractionally. Marcus slid down the wall, gasping for air, his face already swelling from Adrian's blows. Get him out of here, Adrian ordered his guards. Lock him in the holding room. I'll deal with him later when I'm calmer. As they dragged Marcus away, he looked at me with such hatred it made my skin crawl. This isn't over, he gasped. You think you've won, but... The door closing cut off his threats. And then it was just Adrian, me, Dante, and the advisors in a room that smelled of gunpowder and violence. Adrian turned to me slowly. Aurora, I didn't let him finish. 3 years of emotion, love, hurt, fear, rage, poured out in a slap that echoed through the room. Adrian's head snapped to the side, and when he looked back at me, there was shock in his eyes. You believed him, I said, my voice breaking. You believed Marcus over me, over 3 years of marriage, of loyalty, of love. You doubted our daughter, doubted me, doubted everything we built together. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, Aurora, I'm so sorry. The evidence was so convincing, and I never imagined Marcus would... You should have imagined it. You should have trusted me. Tears were streaming down my face now. I climbed out a 14th floor window. I walked into enemy territory alone and pregnant. I risked everything to prove my innocence because you wouldn't believe me. What kind of marriage is that? He reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't. Not yet. I need time to process this, to figure out if I can forgive what you almost did to us. Adrian's face crumpled, and I saw the man beneath the mobster, vulnerable, devastated, recognizing how close he'd come to destroying the best thing in his life. Dante cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps I should leave you two to discuss this privately. I'll need a statement about Marcus's actions for my records, but that can wait. Why did you help me? I asked him. You could have used this situation against Adrian, started the war Marcus was engineering. He smiled that calculating smile. Because, Mrs. Corsetti, I'm playing a longer game than Marcus Delacroix ever imagined. Today I've earned Adrian Corsetti's gratitude and trust. That's worth more than territorial gains. He left, his bodyguards following, and I was alone with my husband in the wreckage of our marriage. Can you forgive me? Adrian asked quietly. I looked at the man I'd loved for 3 years, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. Flawed, capable of terrible mistakes, but also capable of remorse and change. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I'm willing to try, for our daughter's sake, if nothing else. He nodded, understanding that forgiveness would be earned, not freely given. I love you, Aurora. I never stopped, even when I thought. I know. I touched his face where I'd slapped him, gentle now. I know. We stood like that for a long moment, two damaged people trying to find their way back to each other across a chasm of betrayal and pain. It would take time. But time was something we now had, with the truth finally revealed and Marcus's manipulations exposed. Or so I thought, because I didn't yet know about the contingency plan Marcus had put in place, the final weapon he'd prepared to use if his primary scheme failed. I didn't know that my nightmare was far from over. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of difficult conversations and tentative reconciliation. Adrian arranged for Marcus to be transferred to a secure location while he decided what to do with his former friend. The evidence of Marcus's betrayal was overwhelming. Digital trails, witness testimony, financial records showing payments to the people who'd fabricated evidence against me. But even with the truth revealed, the damage lingered. Adrian and I moved around each other carefully, like two people learning a dance for the first time. He'd moved back into our suite, but slept in the sitting room, giving me space to process everything that had happened. I want to know everything, I told him on the second evening after Marcus's exposure. We sat together on the terrace, watching the sun set over the city. About your business, your world, all the things you've kept from me. No more secrets. Adrian hesitated. Some of it is dangerous knowledge, Aurora. I kept you separate from certain aspects to protect you. That protection almost destroyed us, I countered. If I'd known more about your organization, about the people in it, maybe I would have recognized Marcus's obsession earlier. He nodded slowly. You're right. Tomorrow, I'll start explaining everything. The legitimate businesses and the other operations, the alliances and the enemies. All of it. It was a start. A small step toward rebuilding trust. That night, as I was preparing for bed, Elena knocked softly at my door. She entered with unusual urgency, her face pale. Mrs. Corsetti, I need to tell you something. About Marcus. I gestured for her to continue. Before he was arrested, he gave me something. A sealed envelope with instructions to deliver it to you if certain conditions weren't met. She pulled the envelope from her apron pocket. He didn't meet his check-in this evening, which was the trigger. My hands shook as I took the envelope. Did you look inside? No, ma'am. He was very specific that only you should see it. Her eyes were troubled. But Mrs. Corsetti, I have a bad feeling about this. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the envelope. Marcus's final play, whatever it was. I should call Adrian, let him open it with me. But something, pride, perhaps, or the need to face this particular demon alone, made me break the seal myself. Inside was a single sheet of paper and several photographs. I read Marcus's note first, my horror growing with each word. My dearest Aurora, if you're reading this, then my plan has failed, and you've managed to convince Adrian of the truth. Congratulations. But your victory is hollow, because I prepared for this contingency. The Vince family believes you were having an affair with Dante. That perception, carefully cultivated over months, has now become common knowledge in our world. But here's what you don't know. I also sent information to Dante's father, Salvatore Vince, suggesting that you were actually his son's informant, that you were feeding Dante details about Adrian's operations in exchange for protection when your supposed affair was discovered. The photographs enclosed show you meeting with Dante at the cafe, the meeting where you sought his help. To Salvatore, these images prove his son was compromised by a Corsetti spy. Dante's current support of you only confirms his father's suspicions. Salvatore Vince is old school. He doesn't tolerate betrayal, especially not from his own blood. Within days, perhaps hours, he'll strike at you to punish what he believes is Dante's weakness, and he'll do it publicly, brutally, as a message to anyone else who might consider similar treachery. You have two choices, Aurora. Return to me, accept my protection, and I'll call off Salvatore, or face the consequences of your rejection. The clock is already ticking. Forever yours, Marcus. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the paper. The photographs showed exactly what Marcus had described. My meeting with Dante, taken from angles that suggested intimacy and conspiracy. I had to tell Adrian, immediately. I was reaching for my phone when the lights went out. Not just in our room, but throughout the entire estate. I could see through the windows that everything had gone dark. Adrian, I called out, moving toward the sitting room where he'd been reading. The door burst open, but it wasn't Adrian who entered. 3 men in black tactical gear stormed in, moving with military precision. I had 1 second to scream before a hand clamped over my mouth and something sharp pricked my arm. The world went fuzzy around the edges. I fought, struggled, tried to protect my stomach where our daughter grew, but the drug was fast-acting. I felt myself being lifted, carried, the sounds of fighting somewhere distant growing fainter as consciousness slipped away. My last coherent thought was that Marcus had won after all. When I woke to pain, my head throbbing, my arms aching from being bound, my stomach cramping in a way that sent terror through me. The baby. Was my daughter okay? The room was dimly lit, windowless, smelling of mildew and machine oil. A basement, perhaps, or a warehouse. I was tied to a chair, my wrists secured behind me with zip ties that cut into my skin. She's awake, a voice said in Italian. Footsteps approached, and I looked up into the cold eyes of Salvatore Vince. Dante's father was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, dressed in an expensive suit that somehow made him more threatening rather than less. This was a man who ordered deaths over breakfast and never lost sleep. Mrs. Corsetti, he said, his voice carrying a slight accent. Or should I call you by the name you used with my son? The concerned wife seeking justice when really you were nothing but a spy? That's not true, I said, my voice hoarse. Marcus Delacroix fabricated everything. Your son investigated and found proof. My son, Salvatore interrupted, has shown himself to be compromised. Weak. He defended you, exposed Marcus's scheme, all while falling into the very trap you set for him. There's no trap. I went to Dante for help because you needed him to believe your lies, so he would do exactly what he did, turn against his own interests to protect you. Salvatore circled me slowly. You played him expertly, I'll grant you that. But your game ends here. My mind raced, trying to find words that would convince him, but I could see in his eyes that he'd already made his decision. This wasn't an interrogation. It was a prelude to execution. Where's my husband? I demanded. If you've hurt him, Adrian Corsetti is currently occupied with his men, searching frantically for his missing wife. He'll find you eventually, but not before I've made my point. Salvatore pulled out a knife, and I understood with sick certainty that Marcus's contingency plan was succeeding perfectly. Even from prison, he'd orchestrated my death. "Please," I whispered, abandoning pride. "I'm pregnant. Whatever you think I've done, my baby is innocent." Something flickered in Salvatore's expression. "A child," he said softly. "Another complication. But children are born into blood feuds every day. If it survives what happens next, perhaps it will be a reminder to Adrian Corsetti of the cost of betrayal." He raised the knife, and I closed my eyes, whispering a prayer for my daughter's survival. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. I waited for pain that didn't come. When I opened my eyes, Salvatore was staggering backward, blood blooming across his white shirt. His knife clattered to the floor. Dante Vince stood in the doorway, gun still raised. Behind him, Adrian appeared, his face a mask of lethal fury. "Father," Dante said coldly, "you've made a grave error." Salvatore collapsed to his knees, pressing his hand against the wound. "You shot me," he said, disbelief evident. "Your own father, for this woman?" "I shot you to prevent you from murdering an innocent pregnant woman based on lies," Dante corrected. "Mrs. Corsetti is exactly what she claimed, a victim of Marcus Delacroix's manipulation. The evidence is irrefutable." Adrian was at my side, cutting through my bonds with a pocket knife. His hands trembled as he checked me for injuries, his eyes wild with fear I'd never seen before. "Are you hurt? Is the baby—" "I don't know," I admitted. "My stomach's cramping. We need to get to a hospital." Dante was still facing his father, the gun steady despite the turmoil that must have been raging inside him. "You will stand down. Call off any other actions you've planned. Mrs. Corsetti is under my protection as well as her husband's." "You're choosing her over family?" Salvatore gasped. "Over your own blood?" "I'm choosing honor over pride," Dante replied, "and sanity over paranoia. Marcus Delacroix manipulated all of us, set our families against each other. The only way to beat him is to refuse to play his game." Salvatore's men had appeared in the doorway, guns drawn, uncertain who to point them at. Their boss's son, or the Corsetti infiltrators. "Stand down," Salvatore ordered weakly. "All of you. My son has made his position clear." Adrian lifted me carefully, cradling me against his chest. "We're leaving. If you try to stop us, this ends in a bloodbath that benefits no one." Remarkably, Salvatore waved his men aside. Perhaps blood loss was making him rational, or perhaps he finally understood the scope of Marcus's manipulation. Either way, we were allowed to leave, Adrian carrying me through the warehouse toward waiting vehicles. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Adrian held me in the back seat, murmuring promises and apologies, while Dante drove with his characteristic precision. The cramping had gotten worse, and I was terrified of what we might learn. Dr. Moretti met us at the emergency entrance, already alerted to our arrival. They rushed me into an examination room, and the next hour was a nightmare of tests and monitoring and terrible waiting. Finally, Dr. Moretti emerged with news. "The baby is fine. Strong heartbeat, no signs of distress. You have some minor placental irritation from stress and the physical trauma, but bed rest for a few days should resolve it." The relief was so profound I started crying, unable to stop the tears that poured down my face. Adrian held me, his own face wet. Both of us overwhelmed by how close we'd come to losing everything. "I'm prescribing strict bed rest for 1 week," Dr. Moretti continued. "No stress, no excitement, nothing that elevates your heart rate or blood pressure. After that, we'll reassess." As we prepared to leave the hospital, Dante appeared at my door. Mrs. Corsetti, Mr. Corsetti, I wanted to say goodbye before I returned to deal with my father and the aftermath of tonight. You saved my life, I said. Our daughter's life. How can I ever thank you? By remembering that not all Vinces are your enemies, he replied. And perhaps, in time, by considering that our families might benefit more from alliance than conflict. Adrian shook his hand, a gesture laden with significance. You have my gratitude, Dante, and my respect. That's not something I give lightly. After Dante left, Adrian helped me into the car for the drive home. As we passed through the estate gates, I saw increased security, guards at every entrance, cameras on every corner. Adrian was taking no more chances with my safety. In our bedroom, as he helped me settle into bed, I finally asked the question that had been weighing on me. What will happen to Marcus? Adrian's expression went cold. He'll face justice. Our kind of justice, not the legal systems. What he did put you and our daughter at risk, nearly started a war between families. The punishment will fit the crime. I don't want you to become a murderer for me, I said quietly. I already am one, he replied simply. Have been for years. That's the world I live in, the world I tried to protect you from. But you're right. No more secrets. So I'll tell you honestly, Marcus will die for what he did. It's not vengeance, Aurora. It's necessity. Men like him don't stop, don't reform. As long as he's alive, you're in danger. I wanted to argue, to insist there must be another way. But I was too tired, too overwhelmed by everything that had happened. And perhaps some part of me recognized the truth in his words. Marcus would never stop trying to possess me, to destroy what Adrian and I had built. Just promise me, I said, that when it's done, we can finally move forward, build something better than this cycle of violence and revenge. I promise, he whispered, kissing my forehead. Rest now. I'll be right here, watching over you both. As I drifted toward sleep, pain medication making me drowsy, I thought about the woman I'd been before all this started. Naive, sheltered, unaware of the darkness lurking beneath our comfortable existence. That woman was gone forever. But perhaps the person emerging from these ashes was stronger, wiser, more capable of surviving in Adrian's dangerous world. Our daughter kicked softly, reminding me of why the fight had been worth it. For her, I would learn to navigate this world of shadows and violence. For her, I would become whatever I needed to be. And God help anyone who threatened my child's safety. Because I'd learned something valuable from this nightmare. I was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined. The coming months would test that capability in ways I couldn't yet foresee. But for now, I was safe. My baby was safe, and the truth had finally prevailed. Marcus had lost, despite his elaborate schemes and contingency plans, and soon, he would pay the ultimate price for trying to destroy us. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, wrapped in Adrian's protective presence, I finally allowed myself to rest. 2 weeks of strict bed rest gave me plenty of time to think. Adrian worked from a desk he'd moved into our bedroom, refusing to leave me alone for longer than necessary. He was attentive to the point of being overprotective, which was both endearing and occasionally suffocating. But I couldn't entirely blame him. We'd come within hours of losing everything. Our marriage, our daughter, our lives. That kind of terror left marks that time wouldn't easily erase. On the 15th day, Dr. Moretti declared me healthy enough to resume normal activities. Though I'd still avoid extreme stress, she added dryly, as if such a thing were possible in our world. That evening, Adrian asked me to join him in his study. When I arrived, I found Dante Vince already seated, along with several of Adrian's senior advisors. This was clearly more than a casual conversation. "Aurora," Adrian began, "we need to discuss what happens next. With Marcus, with the Vince family, with the reorganization of how we do business." I took the seat beside him, conscious that I was being included in these discussions in a way I never had been before. This was new. Being treated as a full partner, rather than someone to be protected and kept separate from the realities of Adrian's empire. "Marcus is currently in our custody," Adrian continued. "The question is what justice looks like." "He should die," one of the advisors said bluntly. "What he did was treason, attempted murder, conspiracy. Traditional punishment is death." "I agree," another advisor added. "But it should be public within our organization. A message that this kind of betrayal won't be tolerated." I listened to them discuss Marcus's execution with the same clinical detachment they might use when discussing business mergers. This was the world I'd married into, I reminded myself. This was reality, not some sanitized version I'd constructed in my mind. "There's another consideration," Dante interjected. "Marcus has allies, people who were loyal to him over the years. If he simply disappears, or dies mysteriously, they might question what really happened. Some might even believe his version of events, that he was trying to protect Adrian from an unfaithful wife, and was executed for his troubles." "So what do you suggest?" Adrian asked. "A trial of sorts. Gather evidence, present it to the senior leadership of multiple families, not just yours, but neutral parties. Let them hear testimony, see proof of his manipulation. Then when sentence is carried out, no one can claim it was unjust." It was a surprisingly civilized approach from a man whose family business was violence. But I could see the strategic value. Establishing clear facts would prevent Marcus from becoming a martyr to those who'd supported him. "I want to testify," I said, surprising myself as much as everyone else. Adrian turned to me sharply. "Aurora, he tried to destroy our marriage, kidnap me, almost killed our daughter. I deserve to face him, to make sure everyone understands what he did." My hand moved to my stomach protectively. "He doesn't get to write this story. I do." There was silence in the room as the men processed this. Then Dante spoke. "Mrs. Corsetti makes a valid point. Her testimony would be compelling evidence. It would also require you to relive trauma," Adrian countered. "To put yourself in the same room with the man who orchestrated your suffering." "I can handle it," I said firmly. "I need to handle it, for my own peace of mind, if nothing else." Adrian studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If this is what you want, I'll arrange it. But you stop if it becomes too much. Our daughter's health comes first." The trial was set for 1 week later, giving time to gather witnesses and evidence. Adrian's estate became the venue, neutral ground where representatives from several families could observe while maintaining security. Marcus was brought up from the holding cells on the designated day. He looked terrible, thinner, unshaven, his expensive clothes replaced by simple prison gray. But his eyes held the same obsessive gleam when they found me across the room. "My Aurora," he said softly, as if we were alone. "You look well. Pregnancy suits you." I didn't respond, though every instinct screamed to put distance between us. Adrian's hand found mine under the table, a steady anchor. The proceedings were formal but not judicial in any legal sense. This was more a presentation of evidence before Adrian's peers, family heads and senior advisors who would bear witness to Marcus's crimes and the justice that followed. They showed the digital forensics proving the photographs had been manipulated. They presented testimony from the people Marcus had bribed to verify false evidence. They displayed financial records showing his obsessive tracking of my movements and medical care. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood, Adrian's hand reluctantly releasing mine, and faced the assembled crowd. These were dangerous men, most of whom had done terrible things in their lives. But in this moment, I was the one with power, the power of truth, of testimony, of being the victim who refused to be silenced. Marcus Delacroix spent 3 years planning my destruction. I began, my voice steady. From the moment Adrian and I met, he viewed me as something stolen from him, not as a person with my own agency, but as a possession that should have been his. I walked them through the discovery of his scheme, my escape attempts, the confrontation with Salvatore Vince. I held nothing back, not my fear, not my desperation, not the moments when I thought I'd lost everything. He gambled with my daughter's life, I concluded, with my husband's sanity, with the peace between families, all because he couldn't accept that I belonged to myself, not to him. Throughout my testimony, Marcus stared at me with unnerving intensity. When I finished, he finally spoke. "You still don't understand," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I did all of this because I love you. Everything I planned was to save you from Adrian, from the violence and danger of his world. I wanted to give you something better." "You wanted to control me," I corrected. "That's not love, Marcus. That's obsession. Call it what you want." His smile was serene, unrepentant. "But know this, Aurora. Even now, even facing death, I don't regret trying. You were worth every risk, every scheme, every manipulation. In another life, you would have been mine." The delusion was complete, absolute. He truly couldn't see that his actions had been monstrous rather than romantic. In his twisted mind, he was the hero of this story, fighting for his love against all odds. The assembled leaders conferred briefly before rendering their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Sentence: death, to be carried out immediately. "Any last words?" Adrian asked, surprisingly generous given everything Marcus had done. Marcus's gaze found mine one final time. "I'll wait for you, Aurora. In whatever comes after this, I'll wait for eternity if I have to. You were always meant to be mine." Then he closed his eyes, and Adrian raised his gun. I turned away before the shot rang out. I didn't need to see, didn't want that final image burned into my memory. It was enough to know that the nightmare was over, that Marcus's obsession had finally been ended. After the body was removed and the witnesses had dispersed, Adrian found me on the terrace, staring out at the city lights. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly, sliding his arms around me from behind, his hands resting protectively over our daughter. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Relief, definitely. But also a strange sadness. He was your friend once, before the obsession consumed him." "He was. But the man I knew died long before today. Maybe when he saw you for the first time and decided you were something to possess, rather than someone to respect." Adrian's voice carried its own grief. "I should have seen it sooner, should have protected you from him. You couldn't have known." I turned in his arms, looking up at his face. Marcus was careful, patient. He fooled everyone. "Not Dante," Adrian pointed out. "He figured it out quickly enough. Dante had the advantage of distance and objectivity. You were too close to see clearly." We stood like that for a while, finding comfort in physical proximity after so many weeks of tension and separation. Our daughter kicked vigorously, reminding us both of what we'd fought to protect. "I spoke with Dr. Moretti," Adrian said eventually. "She thinks you should consider counseling, processing everything that's happened." "Are you asking me to, or telling me to?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Asking. I'm trying to respect your autonomy more, even when my instinct is to make decisions for your safety." "Then I'll think about it," I said. "But first, I want to do something else." "What's that?" "Tell the truth," Write down everything that happened, exactly as I experienced it. Not for publication or justice. That's already been served. But for our daughter, so when she's old enough to understand, she'll know the real story. Not some sanitized version, but the truth about her father's world and her mother's strength. Adrian considered this. It's dangerous. Physical evidence of family business. Then we'll keep it secure, locked away until the time is right. I placed my hands over his where they rested on my stomach. But I need to do this, Adrian. I need to reclaim my own narrative after months of being defined by Marcus's lies. Then you'll write it, he agreed. And I'll make sure it's protected. Over the next 3 months, as my pregnancy advanced into its final stages, I wrote. I filled journal after journal with every detail of my ordeal. The photographs, the escape attempts, the meeting with Dante, the kidnapping, the trial. I wrote about my fear and my fury, my moments of despair, and flashes of defiant courage. It was cathartic in ways I hadn't anticipated. Each word transferred some of the weight from my shoulders onto the page, making it manageable, containable, understood. Adrian read it as I wrote, his face cycling through horror, pride, and renewed remorse. You're remarkable, he said one evening, having just finished the latest chapter. Stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I had to be. The alternative was becoming Marcus's victim forever. Our daughter arrived on a cold January morning, 3 weeks early, but healthy and furious about being evicted from her comfortable home. We named her Autumn, a season of change, of beauty emerging from death, of transformation. She was perfect. Dark hair like Adrian's, my hazel eyes, and a temperament that suggested she'd inherited stubbornness from both of us. Dante sent an elaborate flower arrangement and a card that simply read, "For the girl who changed everything." The note was cryptic, but I understood its meaning. My ordeal had inadvertently forged an alliance between two families that had been enemies for generations. Dante had proven himself honorable in supporting the truth over his family's traditional interests. And Adrian had learned to trust strategically rather than blindly. In some strange way, Marcus's scheme had created something positive from its wreckage. Not the outcome he'd intended, certainly, but transformation nonetheless. Autumn was 6 months old when I finally finished my written account. It filled 7 leather-bound journals, secured in a fireproof safe in Adrian's study, a complete record of those terrible months and their aftermath. "Do you have any regrets?" Adrian asked me one evening as we watched our daughter sleep in her crib. "About writing it?" "About everything. Marrying me, staying in this world, raising Autumn here instead of somewhere safer." I thought about the question seriously, because he deserved honesty. No regrets about marrying you or staying, but I've made a decision about raising our daughter. Concern flickered across his face. "What kind of decision?" "I want to learn," I said firmly. "Everything you know about protecting myself, about understanding threats, about operating safely in your world. I never want to be helpless again, never want to be a pawn in someone else's game. You want me to teach you?" He sounded surprised. "You and Dante both, if he's willing. I want to understand strategy, self-defense, how to recognize danger before it arrives. Not because I plan to involve myself in your business, but because I need to be able to protect our daughter if something happens to you." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "It's not the path I would have chosen for you. But after everything that's happened, I understand. You're right. Knowledge is protection." So began my second education. 3 times a week, I trained in self-defense with specialists Adrian hired. I learned to shoot, to assess threats, to move safely through dangerous spaces. Dante, true to his word, taught me about the politics and psychology of our world, how power flowed, where alliances were forged and broken, how to read situations accurately rather than optimistically. It was exhausting, occasionally terrifying, but ultimately empowering. I was no longer the sheltered wife who'd hidden her pregnancy in fear. I was becoming someone formidable in her own right. Autumn grew, surrounded by love and security, and parents who would burn the world down to protect her. She was curious and fearless, already showing signs of the strength she'd need to navigate the complicated legacy she'd inherited. On her first birthday, we gathered for a small celebration, just family and a few trusted friends. Dante attended, bringing an extravagant gift and a promise to be Autumn's godfather if we'd allow it. An alliance sealed in family bonds, he said, with his calculating smile. The best kind. As I watched Adrian and Dante talk easily, their old enmity transformed into something resembling friendship, I thought about how far we'd all come. Marcus had tried to destroy us, and had instead catalyzed our evolution. That night, after the guests had left and Autumn was asleep, Adrian and I stood on the terrace where I'd spent so many hours during my ordeal. Happy? He asked, pulling me close. Getting there, I admitted, still healing but stronger every day. You never answered my earlier question completely, he said, the part about regrets. I looked up at him, this dangerous man I'd chosen to spend my life with. I regret the pain we went through. I regret that Marcus's obsession cost him his life and nearly cost us ours. But I don't regret the person it made me become. That woman is worth every terrible moment. You were always that woman, Adrian said softly. You just didn't know it yet. Maybe he was right. Maybe the strength had always been there, dormant, waiting for crisis to call it forth. Or maybe we become who we need to be, shaped by the fires we're forced to walk through. Either way, I was no longer the naive bride who'd married Adrian Corsetti 3 years ago. I was Aurora Corsetti, survivor, mother, fighter, and equal partner in a marriage forged through betrayal and reborn through truth. Our story wasn't the fairy tale I'd once imagined. It was messy, violent, complicated, real. But it was ours, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. In my study, the 7 journals sat locked away, a testament to survival, to resilience, to love that endured despite impossible odds. One day, when Autumn was old enough to understand, I would give her the key and tell her to read. She would learn about the darkness that had almost consumed us, about her mother's desperate fight for survival, about the unlikely alliance that had saved us all. But she would also learn the most important lesson, that truth, once revealed, has a power that no deception can withstand. Marcus had built his scheme on lies, manipulation, and manufactured evidence. And in the end, the simple truth had destroyed everything he'd constructed. That was the legacy I wanted for my daughter. Not innocence or sheltered ignorance, but the fierce knowledge that honesty, courage, and strategic thinking could defeat even the most elaborate conspiracy. Let her grow up strong. Let her grow up aware. Let her grow up capable of protecting herself and those she loved. Because in our world, that was the greatest gift I could give her. Not safety, which was always an illusion, but the skills to create her own security. As I closed my laptop that night, having written the final entry in my digital record of these events, I felt something settle inside me. Peace, perhaps, or at least acceptance. Marcus had tried to make me his victim. Instead, he'd forged me into something he could never have controlled or contained.